So we have time today to explore and investigate a particular topic. There are so many different aspects in the experience of mindfulness-based stress reduction and in teaching MBSR. And today we'll be focusing on the relational essence in MBSR. MBSR is an invitation to engage authentically with one's own life, and in that process to discover one's own authentic, innate presence. It's an invitation to actually author our own lives, to make wise choices. When we actually look deeply at the process that unfolds through this 8-week, very systematic experience called MBSR, we find that two very distinct and interconnected elements show up. One is greater intimacy, and the other is exploring relationship. So I'll be talking about this and really taking a look at this on a very broad level and then very specifically as it unfolds in the MBSR classroom. So the title of this webinar is This Being Human. The first line of a very well-known poem from Rumi called The Guest House, where he says, "This being human is a guest house, every morning a new arrival." And so it's like that, this waking up to our life and to the recognition that there's constant change. But there's also this innate capacity, this innate resource to be awake, to be aware of wanting things to be different. In the midst of change, wanting to hold on to the pleasantness, to what we love in our lives, and wanting to push away the difficult, the unpleasant. So in that discovery is our relationship to this wanting things to be different. And in that discovery of that relationship is the seed for greater freedom. One of the leaders of sensory awareness, Charlotte Selver, who lived to 102 and totally embraced life mindfully, talked about the vibrancy of every moment, the felt sense of every moment that's available to us. And she said, there is something in us, deep in us, which knows. There is something in us, deep in us, which knows. This is the innate capacity. This is this awareness itself. This is mindfulness. To actually know what's happening as it's happening. In MBSR, we cultivate and strengthen our access to what's already here. It's not like we have to go into a self-improvement mode. It's not that we have to fix ourselves, become shinier versions of ourselves, but more gain access to the vastness that we all embody. The wisdom, the openness, the warmth, the awareness itself. And so through the process of awareness of the body, awareness of pleasantness and unpleasant experience, awareness of thoughts and emotions, awareness that there is constant change, that in every life there is dissatisfaction, and that in every life this sense of me being solid and fixed is not quite so, that we're more fluid than we often allow ourselves to experience. So this experience of intimacy with our own life is cultivated more and more, week by week, in the MBSR class. Intimacy with the present moment. Intimacy with our health. Intimacy with the body. So often, the experience of the body is pushed away whether it's through the realm of it's not spiritual enough, it's not pure enough, it doesn't look good enough, it's too old, it's too young, it's something. But to actually experience the vibrancy of the body through the felt sense of pulsation, touch, warmth, coolness, this is cultivated, especially in the first few classes, but throughout the whole program, but particularly with the body scan, with walking meditation, with yoga, with awareness of the breath, coming close up and intimate with bodily experience, with the vibrancy of sensation. And from this, greater ability to know oneself physically, and then care for oneself more wisely. So relationship and intimacy with the body. There's also the invitation to get to know the constructing mind, how we, in this moment, experience our lives through many, many filters of what occurred to us before, or what we were told about ourselves, or how we are seeing the world. And this is absolute big-time news for many people coming into MBSR, to recognize that there is in all of us a capacity that recognizes thoughts, that's actually receptive to thoughts, and that we're much more than our thought processes and our emotional streams as well. In Belgium, on the crest of a medieval house, are these words: Plus est en vous. There's more in you. MBSR invites us into that relationship of discovering the moreness of who we are, the deepness of who we are, the lightness of who we are, the fluidity of who we are. And so our relationship to our thoughts and emotions is open for change through the cultivation of mindfulness. And of course, we begin to recognize, how am I seeing this body? How am I seeing this world? How am I seeing my relationships? Do we just take them at face value? Or maybe look again. Wonder about the way that we draw conclusions moment to moment about ourselves and others, about the conditions and challenges in our lives. In this slide, you see that something can look round or square depending on perspective. It's all how we see it. And then, of course, our relationship to mystery, our relationship to a vastness that is within us and within everyone, that manifests as this life, as this world. The mystery that we are on a planet circling the sun, when we're so often drop deeply into the details of our own lives, our own challenges, our own problems, what we want, and sometimes opening up and recognizing that there is a big world and we are a small part of it here. So our relationship to mystery is possible to open. Our relationship to silence and stillness. So we can see how intimacy and relationship come very closely together here. This dropping in deeply and exploring the interconnectivity of our experience. And the only moment we have is now to do this. So the discipline of training ourselves to come back again and again to what's actually here, to be awake to the times when we want to escape, we want to get out, and turn toward that. To be awake to the times that we just want it to be different, or we want to manipulate an experience to have it our way. When we begin to wake up, we can say, oh, here's this. Right in this moment, it's possible to show up and be present. So the intimacy with the vibrancy of this moment of being alive is here. Maybe we can just pause for a moment and sense this breath. It's this breath, this in-breath, that renews this life. That's all we really know how long our life is just this breath. There's a story about a sage who was once asked, how long is a human life? And the sage turned to his students and said, what do you think? How long is a human life? And they offered different answers. I don't know, 70 years, 80 years, 90 years. And each one of them, the sage kept saying, no, something else, another suggestion. And finally, what it came to was really the length of a human life is one in-breath. On the out-breath, what is no longer needed is released. But life is renewed in one moment, in one breath. So all of these elements, the dropping more intimately into our lives, exploring the possibility, the potential for our relationship to our health, our relationship to our challenges, our problems, our heartache, our joys, exploring how we engage with our lives in this way. This is all part of what is potential in MBSR. So let's take a look now. Since MBSR is taught, traditionally taught from its very beginning in a group, this relational quality extends to the human being as a relational creature. And we'll take a look at how does that manifest in this MBSR class and program. So, as human beings, it's one thing to look at trees, to look at flowers or birds, to experience nature in that way. That we can all call to mind in this moment, experiences like that, receiving the call of a bird, the lift of the heart with seeing a vast sky, the sound of the waves of the ocean, a taste of something sweet. The senses receive the world, and then through awareness, the world is known, through this ability to know. So, yes, we hear, we see, we touch, we smell, we taste. The sixth sense of the mind that perceives, the mind that associates, that constructs, that conceptualizes, is also recognized as a way where we touch the world and then it's known. But we can also know how we're making sense of the world through the mental formations. So, fine, we receive this input, but it becomes different when we actually are engaged with another human being. Even with our very animal nature, our fleshy selves, we're highly relational and have been since the beginning of time to survive. It's been part of evolution that we needed to relate. We needed to be fed, to be held, to be cared for. And the communication from the very early days of one sound receiving attention from a caretaker, the relationality begins right there, if not before. As human beings, we have high sensitivity to groups because, again, we needed to survive by dependence on others. To be excluded from the clan could amount to death. So this sensitivity to, are we accepted? Are we recognized? Can play out quite strongly in our relationship with groups. And the slightest information, the turn of an eye, the drop of a chin, the movement of a hand, are all areas that we're highly, highly tuned. And in that split second, we conceptualize a story of what that other person intends. For many of us, to meet another person face to face is a lot of information. For some of us, this may feel very comfortable, very easeful. For others, it might be that the visual modality is highly, highly sensitized, and that feels like a lot of information to have eye contact with another human being. There's a lot that goes into how we define ourselves as shy. But that might be part of it, of sort of needing some filters around the intensity of direct gaze. And a face shows so much. I mean, there's research done now on just the slightest movements in facial expression say so much. The psychologist Arnie Mindell once said that the work goes on in the dojos of our relationships. Now, dojo is a place of practice. It's often a place of martial art studying. So here's a dojo of relationality. I mean, our whole life is this, really. And then we take it into this container of the MBSR classroom, which is highly relational. And it's relational from the intimacy of individuality, all the way through to the group of the class. So in this place of being present with another, truly being received, may be a place of powerful healing that occurs in the simple interactions in class. But so much has to do with the way that the MBSR teacher holds the class, the way a question is received, the way the teacher perceives body language, the possibility of pausing, connecting internally and externally, and both. So we all know that relationships are complex, and that what may look like a simple surface of greetings, hellos, whether this is with people in the class, whether it's with our colleagues, with our closest relationships, with loved ones, with family members. There's a lot of information that is being processed in any moment of interaction. And as we cultivate greater awareness, as we're embodied and awake in our lives, we can be awake to this internal process that's rising, staying for a while, and passing while we're engaged with another person. And so what's going on underneath the surface? Well, for one thing, there may be a deep sense of loneliness and wanting to more deeply connect. There may be a profound hunger for affirmation. Am I okay? Do you appreciate me? Do you approve? This is as primal as being included in the circle around the fire. And then, of course, there may be also this isolation and this wanting to get away, this fear of intimacy, this fear of engagement. And these may be flickering in a few moments' time in an interaction. But with awareness of, oh, this is coming here now. Oh, interesting. It's possible to hold it. It's possible to stay steady with these fluctuations of wanting something to be a different way, of hungering, of longing, of craving, relationally. So often in our classes, what we hear are reasons that people come to MBSR. There's usually some kind of challenge, some kind of a loss that people are recognizing and wanting somehow to engage with. So when we really look at it, we can see that even if it looks like a broken leg, it's going to have relational impact. So a person breaks her leg. So suddenly, she is dependent on others to help her get around, to drive her places. She has days out of work. Financially, she might be challenged with this. So in one thing that looks like, well, it's just my body, it actually starts to manifest socially and interpersonally. Some of the loss, of course, that people talk about when they come into the MBSR class it's a wide range. It might be having received a diagnosis, a certain health challenge, and the shock of that, and the feeling of wanting to engage somehow, mobilize one's resources toward health. So what happens there with receiving a diagnosis? Something nobody wants to hear these words. And feeling perhaps burdened by it, feeling victimized by it. Why me? What did I do to deserve this? So all of these filters are here. And then the questions of how, if I'm sick, how will I take care of my family? Sometimes people come into the class with challenges, financial challenges, having lost a job. Again, it looks like one thing, but it has a web of interconnectivity when we actually look at it. Internally, then, there are relational issues that show up in MBSR. This sense of not being good enough, the sense of feeling separate from others, the feeling of self-judgment, self-criticism, the kind of inner harm that we're capable of hurting ourselves. One's doubt about the value that we have, the gifts and talents that we have to bring into the world, that are ours, uniquely ours, to bring. All of this is suffering. So, we say mindfulness-based stress reduction, but we really know it could be mindfulness-based suffering reduction. There is no human being who does not experience some dissatisfaction, some unsatisfactoriness in life. And again, that is an equation for suffering. And the freedom is how we explore our relationship with it and to ourselves, as well as with others. This is a classic image of different people trying to explore what is an elephant and feeling different parts of the elephant and saying, oh, this is what it is. Oh, it's a rope. Oh, it's a snake. It's a wall. It's a fan. And it's all just, we're receiving part of the picture, not the whole thing. And that's okay. It's usually the way it is. It's usually how our experience is. That we can see part and rarely see the whole. But we can know that there's more. Plus est en vous. We can know it as much as we might see a sliver, teeny sliver, crescent of the moon. But we know there's a whole moon all the time. It's always a full moon. It's just how much we see. So how does that relate to us relating to ourselves and to one another? Waking up to what glasses are we wearing? This is huge to recognize that our way of perceiving is going to impact our experience of our lives. And that it's not just one thing is the way it is, but look again. The word respect, if we take it apart, is like spectacles to re-look. So we might want to really check out what are the glasses we are wearing. What are the glasses we are wearing? How are we seeing? Is it possible to lift those glasses and try another, just even for fun, just playfully, to experiment with a different perspective? I recently saw a very short film clip, and it showed this man irritated. He's beginning his day, gets in the car, he's annoyed by a kid on a skateboard, and then he goes to get coffee, and there's a long line at the coffee shop, and then there's a traffic jam, and he's the whole way, he's just irritated, everyone's bothering him, it's all their fault. And through this mysterious moment, there's a man who hands him a different pair of glasses. And he puts on the glasses, and he looks around, and he sees these people who bothered him. And he says, there's one, it says, he sees, just had an argument with her husband, fighting with addiction, no one to take care of him, just lost his job. And suddenly, it's like we're looking deeper. Suddenly those glasses allowed a greater clearness, and from that greater compassion for ourselves and one another. So what are the glasses you are wearing? How do you play with that? How do all of us engage with this word wholeness? This sense that we so often limit who we are. We make ourselves very, very small. But when we have the incredible blessing, I would say, to wake up, to touch that knowing, there is no limit there. That wakefulness is love itself. It's boundless. But it's not about hearing it, it's about knowing it. When we touch into that, something is known. And MBSR, it's not a guarantee that every person will wake up and have deeper love for themselves. But we've seen it many times. And MBSR is a very carefully planned movement, building systematically week to week the possibility to touch wholeness, to recognize that sunshine and shadow can exist in the same moment. Recently, traveling, I experienced a very big sky. And when I looked at the sky, I saw an absolute blue, clear sky to my right, and on my left, thunderclouds. Just right there. And I thought, this is how it is. It's like awareness itself holds pairs of opposites, holds parts of ourselves that we feel are too different and distant from one another. But actually, in awareness, all of it can be known, all of it can be held. And the quality of non-judgmentalness is the key to the courage that it takes to wake up to this. To recognize that it's like this. Like it or not, right now, this is how it is. Another line from Charlotte Selver is, realize that every breath in you and every drop of blood in you is the same life substance as in everybody else. And it is just as important and precious as that of everybody else. So this is something that we experience unfolding in the relational field of MBSR. So let's take a look at this right now. So a group comes together with individual, unique reasons for engaging, for this life learning that's offered through MBSR, for beginning a process that could support them in their lives. And of course, you know, as I mentioned, some people are there because of very strong suffering. Some people are there because they're curious or they're proactive about caring for their lives. They're recognizing certain things that are happening, repeated insomnia or dependence on substances to try to get relief. And so they're choosing, like, there must be better ways to do this. They're choosing to care for themselves this way. So the wide range of people come in with an individual reason. And from the very first class, people share, why are you here? Why are you really here? And here we begin, this human being club. This sense of all the different ways that have drawn us together into this work, into this adventure, into this experiment of individual lives, but also collectively. And as people hear one another from that very first class, and this continues through the 8 weeks, there is this sense of exchange that often happens with, wow, that's just what I was going to say. Or that's just like me. Or I know someone with a very similar problem as this. Not that people are cross-talking with one another, but there's this waking up to more than me. And I have so many times heard people say, I guess everybody has something. I'm not the only one. I came in feeling it was only me. No one could know how challenging this life is. no one could possibly understand. And then here we go, this recognition of the many, many, many ways that we all experience difficulty. So from that moment, the class shifts into not so much dwelling on the challenges and problems that drew them in the first place, but really forming as a very proactive group that is a learning community. And that exchange of collective wisdom continues in the class as people go home and practice for the week and then return talking about their challenges, their discoveries. How did they make the time to practice the body scan? What about the informal practice? What discoveries are here? We share this in the group. And that same experience of isolation again and again shifts. And one structural collective group process that is going on here is sometimes called subgroups. So you might say, how many people fell asleep in the body scan? There'll be a few people, maybe one brave person raised their hand and said, I fell asleep 6 times this week during the body scan. And then as the teacher asks anyone else, you'll see many other hands go up. And you'll see on that first person's face a look of relief and astonishment. Again and again, this sense of the suffering of being separate, isolated, not understood, dissolves and breaks open. And then there are the sparks of creativity that are shared. So when the class discusses finding the time to practice, in that group there will be people who have found creative ways to make time to practice, to do it at lunchtime, to wait in their car before going into their house, to get up a half an hour earlier. And this too is inspirational to one another. So sharing their process, sharing their discoveries, they are engaged as supportive of one another. More and more, what begins to happen is a sense of common humanity. And this bottom line that we're all highly sensitive, we all have vulnerability, we all have met and will meet challenges in our lives. All of us live with constant change, and all of us have the capacity to be awake and to engage wisely, to relate wisely with all that goes through our lives. This mindfulness being the uniting element. This beingness, this knowing, and knowing the knowing, knowing, knowing the being. It's so here, it's so much part of us that we overlook it. You know, as Rumi said, it's the secret in plain sight. And here's our work in MBSR. To engage with one another, to engage with ourselves. So there's the practice, there's the learning, there's the learning community. So you might ask, who is the teacher here? What is the teacher in MBSR? I mean, in no way to minimize the presence of the person who's actually holding the class is taking responsibility and all that that entails. But for that teacher to hold the whole group as a relational field, as the teacher's field of awareness, as the teacher holds the class, and each individual in that class with deep respect, with attentiveness and curiosity. Here's the practice right here. Here are attitudes of mindfulness that are alive in the actual teaching of the class. Then we might say, okay, so the practice is the teacher. The teacher has a role and gifts and process to guide. And the community is the teacher. And every individual is the teacher. Intimacy and relationship flowing through every moment of our lives and of MBSR. In the class, there are many moments when we ask people to work in dialogue, one-on-one, small groups, then the large groups, small groups, one-on-one, individually, going home and practicing, coming back. And people often talk about these moments of mindful dialogue being huge breakthroughs. To actually be listened to with interest, with attentiveness, is something that many, many people have never experienced. It's a gift that we can offer one another to listen attentively. It's the element of presence itself. And in that place of being met, the healing that's possible there, again, is internal and external. Because in that place of being met, of being received, not interrupted, allowed to be, greater insight can rise around the conditioning that we all carry in relationship with one another. The conditioning of wanting to be seen, wanting not to be seen, following our own judgments as reality. It's right, it can be touched in a relational moment. So in that way, mindfulness and the cultivation of mindfulness is not just a public health initiative, but a societal change, a possibility for healing society as we each heal and work with our own unique challenges in relationship. And we discover this in a relational space, with practice as the focus point, the practice to wake up. Peter Senge once said that the core capacity needed to skillfully move into the future is presence. And the description of what presence is being fully conscious and aware in the present moment. And a deep listening, being open, beyond one's preconceptions and historical ways of making sense. Here's curiosity. Here's perception checking. What glasses am I looking through? How am I listening internally and externally? And in that, how am I intimate with this moment of my life? Thank you, everyone. It's been a joy.